The Earth rotates once a day, which is why there is day and night. However, it could have just hung there without rotating, right? The Moon does the same thing around itself and around the Earth, and takes exactly the same amount of time for both. That is why we always see only one side of it from here. The Sun rotates too, not equally fast everywhere, which is already strange for something made of gas. Faster at the equator than at the poles, which would be impossible for a solid sphere. 3 different objects, different sizes, different materials, yet the same behavior. And it doesn't stop at 3 examples. Planets rotate, stars rotate, black holes rotate, some almost at the speed of light. Even entire galaxies spin around their center. On small scales, rotation is already normal. Asteroids spin, even individual dust grains in space tumble and rotate if you observe them closely. If you go one step larger, nothing changes about the pattern. Star systems rotate as a whole. Binary stars do not just orbit each other. They also spin around their own axis while doing so, and in extreme environments, it gets even crazier. Neutron stars, meaning what is left of an exploded star, can spin hundreds of times per second. Some reach speeds of over 700 revolutions per second. Imagine an object heavier than the Sun spinning faster than a blender. If you collect enough examples, you eventually reach a point where coincidence is no longer a good explanation. Everything rotates from dust grain to galaxies. The pattern does not just appear often, it appears practically everywhere. There is hardly anything in the universe that stands completely still, without any rotation. If rotation is so widespread, then there must be a reason behind it that has nothing to do with coincidence. Something in the way matter comes together in the first place seems to generate rotation practically automatically. To understand this, it helps to think about order and chaos. Perfect symmetry, meaning truly exact uniformity without any deviation, is extremely rare in nature. Almost impossible, actually. Even if something looks completely uniform at first glance, a gas cloud, for example, there are always small differences. A little more density here, a little less there. Tiny imbalances that you can hardly measure. And exactly these small deviations are the key. A perfectly symmetrical cloud would, if it collapses, simply fall straight inward. But such a cloud practically does not exist. Movement, even a tiny one, is the more natural state than complete standstill. Standstill would need perfect conditions, which hardly exist in the universe. Movement only needs a small irregularity, and that exists almost everywhere. Imagine a huge gas cloud that is slowly contracting due to its own gravity. This cloud almost never has a perfect shape. It has small unevennesses, slight movements in different directions. When such a cloud gets smaller, something interesting happens. The small, actually insignificant movements that barely mattered before suddenly became important. They reinforce each other. This works similarly to an ice skater who pulls in their arms and thereby spins faster. If matter contracts, every small rotational movement that was there before automatically becomes faster and clearer. Out of a chaotic pile of slightly moving matter, a clearly recognizable rotational movement is formed. This happens with planets, just as it does with entire galaxies. Here, a principle comes into play that is quite fundamental in physics. Rotational movement does not just get lost. It can distribute itself, change itself, but it does not disappear on its own. That is why a rotating cloud, a rotating planet or star, does not suddenly stop spinning. It would need something that actively acts against it, a brake, so to speak. And in empty space, there is hardly anything that breaks. That is also the reason why the Earth has been spinning for billions of years without slowing down significantly. There is almost no resistance that could stop the rotation. Once in motion, an object tends to stay in motion over extremely long periods of time. Exactly because of this, we still see today the exact behavior that emerged billions of years ago. The rotation from back then is basically still there. If you look at all of this together again, it is always the same mechanism. Planets form from contracting clouds of dust and gas, and thereby take over the rotation that was already laid out in this cloud. Stars work exactly the same way. A gas cloud contracts, small movements reinforce each other, and in the end, the finished star rotates. With galaxies, it happens identically in principle, just on a completely different scale. Huge amounts of gas and matter contract over millions of years, and out of the initial irregularities, a large rotating structure is formed. Even black holes fit the picture. They often form from collapsing stars that were already spinning, and simply take over this rotation. Different sizes, different materials, different time periods, but at the core, always the same process. When you take everything together, you come to a conclusion that seems strange at first glance, but is actually quite logical. Rotation is not the exception in the universe. It is the normal case. Standstill, meaning an object that does not spin at all, would need perfect conditions. A completely symmetrical cloud, without any irregularity that collapses exactly uniformly. Something like that practically does not exist in reality. Rotation, on the other hand, only needs a tiny deviation, some small movement that is reinforced during contraction, and such small deviations exist everywhere, in every gas cloud, in every star-forming region. Therefore, almost everything spins. Not because rotation is somehow preferred, but because standstill is simply the more unlikely option. So, the question is not actually why so much is spinning. The actual question would be why anything doesn't do it. There is actually hardly anything in the universe that stands truly completely still. If you look long enough, you almost always find some form of rotation, tumbling, or circling, no matter how small. You usually think that rest is the natural state and movement is the disturbance. In the universe, it is rather the other way around. Movement, especially rotation, is the standard. With that, we land back at the question from the beginning. Earth, galaxies, everything spins because exactly that happens when matter contracts under its own gravity, with all the small irregularities that are automatically reinforced in the process. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see each other next time.